Szanowni Państwo,
So, dear all, we're a bit behind schedule, but nonetheless beginning the next session of the Congress of 3C's Theologians. Today's topic is, topical and timely faith. We talked about the image of God that we all have, different ways of perceiving the image of God, and now we'll be talking about the place for church in pluralistic society. I would like to ask Professor Piotr Kopiec to moderate the panel. Professor is with ecumenism in the theological faculty at the Catholic University of Lublin. He's a professor of theology as well as sociology. Professor, please take the microphone and exercise your privilege of introducing and welcoming our panelists. Thank you, Father Dean, for the introduction. So, Your Magnificence's priests, dear guests, first I would like to welcome our speakers. Father Professor Marian Machinek from Warmia and Mazury University. So please take your seat if you may. Professor Monika Przybysz from Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. As well as Professor Bronisław Kluska from Różenbarok Catholic University in Slovakia. Together with the speakers, we agreed that we would conduct the sessions starting with the introductions, then the speeches, and the questions will be collected and addressed after the presentations. On top of that, the fourth speaker is not here with us, sadly, because of some family affairs. He was not able to come. Father Professor Janusz Mariański sent his presentation in, and I'll read out his speech. It's a very dense article, so coherent that removing any part of it wouldn't do it justice. On the final note, I will read Father Professor Janusz Mariański's presentation as well. So if I may, a few words of introduction to this session and to this topic. We're almost at the close of intellectual ruminations that have been underway during this Congress, and these ruminations are moving to more general level. In this session, however, we are at the highest possible level of generality. The term pluralism is a general term, after all. We often use an old Chinese expression, Swan lived in interesting times, and we are living in interesting times. It's not good to wish to anyone to live in interesting times, but we have to accept it, take it in our stride. We're living in the time of acceleration in all paths of life, talking about culture, politics, economy, social institutions, family, but also religiosity and faith and episteme. We are undergoing destabilizing changes. In theology and social sciences, this condition of the world is being described. The concept of instability, fluid reality, the society of risk, lack of transparency, social systems that lack transparency, all of those are terms which are important in describing the modern world. We also live in the so-called, well, a kind of a cognitive tension. This cognitive tension stems from lack of congruence, and we are observing pluralism of thought, religious pluralism, pluralism of worldview, ethical stances, and it's also a pluralism that could be compared to a second notion, relativism. And relativism was described as a quip by Werner, one of the critics of modernism. So it's a rule of postmodernism. Gellner played a linguistic exercise when talking about postmodernism, the world we're living in. There are no rules. Relativism is a rule, but in itself it cannot be a rule. So we should call them anti-relativisms. But if we use this notion, we go against relativism. So it's double anti-relativism. And you could indefinitely add prefixes to relativism, which goes to show the contradiction, which is part of the modernity. Apart from pluralism, we have more observations to be made. French philosopher Alain Touraine described as a dominating interpretation discourse. We have some ways of thinking which dominate, going beyond which is treated as transgression and breaking through this dominance and isn't considered to be legitimate. In the Western world, the interpretation discourse is combined with neoliberal democracy and free market economy. Another phase of this contradiction is a myth of the West we're a part of, which is constantly confronted with the critique of the West that reaches us, post-colonial critique, neo-colonial critique, that reaches us from Asia, Africa, South America, and is in line with a term coined by Bonaventura de Santos from Argentina. He said it was epistemocid, a killing of the knowledge of post-colonial societies that are now reconstructing this knowledge. And another contradiction arises as a result. We also have voices of economic futurologists who are attempting to describe the world to come. The end of work, end of labor is an idea. Technological unemployment is another idea that we've heard. And the latter will bring about profound change in social and economic systems, and subsequently will lead to sacrifices being made in manifested as crises of various kinds. These are just some aspects that impact and contribute to the destabilized view of the world we're living in. We are at a congress of 3 C's theologians. We're narrowing our perspective to 3 C's, and this destabilization, transformation, the search for new forms is something we also do. And by we, I mean Christians and theologians of 3Cs region, and they create or contribute to experiences which are threefold. First of all, we've just stabilized the situation after the fall of communism not so long ago. We underwent transformation which brought with it economic, social crises and instability. All of the 3Cs states face similar issues and are facing them now, but the dust has settled and now we're entering further reaching global transformation. Secondly, our churches report are subject to global transformations, and there are a lot of isms and terms which describe this transformation: Pentecostalization, secularization of a Euro-Atlantic sphere. This is a title of one of the papers in Europeans. They said, "We're Europeans, please, no religion. Let's not get religion involved." In Christianity, there are tensions between liberalism and fundamentalism. There is a discourse on the movement of Christianity into the global south. Thirdly, what we are experiencing every day is the outflow of young people leaving the church, losing a strong position in a moral epistemic debate in the public sphere, polarization of value systems that we're experiencing, the ease with which one can access information, but information which isn't ordered, is chaotic. And that was another phase of the challenges we're facing. On top of that, churches have to learn to shape their message for the young generations. And we could be lenient for various rhetorical figures and names that journalists are using. Different divisions of generations, baby boomers, Generation Z, Generation X. I'm not questioning the adequacy, the validity of these terms. But in public sphere, we have qualities attributed to the generation that is now making political decisions, that is shaping the social life. Lack of understanding for hierarchy is one of the qualities attributed to the young generation. Over-intellectualization, superficial scientism, focusing on one's own well-being, one's own emotions, which is a part of consumerism as an idea. What we're experiencing is the basis. Trust in expertise, which means oftentimes looking for answers to questions in sociological or psychological textbooks, technological paradigm associated with the culture of the internet, which are introducing the criterion of measurability, and also shaping knowledge which isn't measurable or useful. And you may put those ideas into question and you may question the validity of these generalizations, but we are using them nonetheless. And they're shaping and defining our knowledge, also our social knowledge. In the proceedings, we referred to theological authorities, authority figures. So at the end of my short introduction, I wanted to appeal to Reinhold Niebuhr, a theological authority figure, an American theology of German origin, who 100 years ago pondered on the attitude of Christians to pluralistic societies. He observed the rise of pluralism in the 20s in America, and later on he observed the crisis in Germany and the birth of Nazism in Germany. and in the tension between radical unification, axiological unification, and pluralism on the other hand, he was trying to find a place for Christianity among the tensions. He presented a system he called Christian realism. And he speaks of Christian realism with particular reference to the role of churches, plural, not just one, in determining axiological sphere in the society. He strived to show how theological realism could be used for analyzing moral discourses in pluralistic society. His starting point was the conviction that God was in the center of value system. And here a quote from him, quote, "God is that with which all the reality has to be one with, and its perspective is necessary for evaluating that which is human," end quote. To look at the connection of God with theology, he understood that axiology could be associated with by people with different value systems. At the center of pluralistic society, a Christian, according to Niebuhr, has to act in a way so as the theological message is credible. But for the theological message to be credible, and we addressed this issue in the previous session today, it cannot be polemic, because that way we would narrow down one side or various sides of a debate. Well, we could talk more about, you could say more about Niebuhr, but it's not a lecture on him. I wanted to welcome Father Professor Marian Machinek. I will briefly tell you more about Father Professor. Father Professor Marian Machinek is a member of Association of Missionaries of Holy Family. He is with Warmia and Mazur University, where he is the head of Moral Theology Department and Family Sciences Department. He's a member of Committee of Theological Sciences of Polish Academy of Sciences. He is a chief editor of the Studies on Theological Sciences. He's a head of moralist theology scholars, and he deals with biblical ethos, the question of conscience, and anthropological moral theology, and also the ethics of family. He's an author of 8 monographies called The Dispute Over Embryo, A New Rainbow World, an attempt at a diagnosis. The titles show how timely these publications are. He's an editor and chief editor of 6 papers and also numerous articles. Father Professor, please take the floor.
Piękne dzięki. Thank you very much for inviting me to this Congress. I have prepared a short presentation on this topic. This world we refer to as the postmodern world is the world of the end of great narratives, including the Christian narrative. It's a post-world that could be referred to as post-humanism, post-Christianism, post-modernity. The prefix post refers to going beyond something, overcoming something, and at the same time opening a new chapter. If it comes to the modernity and the features of modernity that are important to my topic, and we are talking about the dispute about man, the human person, we should refer to empirical sciences because their application has increased. As we have heard in the introduction by Professor Piotr Kopiec, we have there we find the reflection which is non-scientific. Sometimes we say that they include only certain narratives, accounts. Another element that is very often ascribed to the oppositional party is the question about the power. No one will tell me how I should live. That's the question that is being posed very often in this context. It also refers to the power to suggest, indicate certain values. Chantal Delsol talked about the mentality of a demiurge, something that refers to the past, derives from the tradition, indicating that we should abandon the tradition to set ourselves free from that baggage. So we are talking about the mentality of demiurge and the mentality of a gardener. The gardener can take care of something but does not provide for the growth. And demiurge, on the other hand, burns down everything to the ground and something new is being created in that place. And then we've got the idea of self-invention. In that world, we deal with a reductive view of the human person. It seems in the beginning something that extends our perspective, because the human person, this idea, is broadened to include also, for instance, animals. So the entities that were so far have been declared non-human. But on the other hand, we have, for instance, artificial intelligence. Some people refer to it as the wet artificial life, a technology that is being added to biological life, which gives rise to this artificial structure, which we sometimes refer to as the wet artificial life. This is related to formulas such as nothing else but an illusion, when in our mind certain processes unfold. So ethics is nothing more than the result of a social agreement. There are no elements except those which we agree upon. Apart from that, human nature is something that has been deconstructed and proven false. Apart from that, we can notice an interesting fusion in that model, trying to combine monistic concepts with dualistic concepts. And as a result, this model becomes a bit fuzzy. The new view of man is dualistic because human body is perceived as something external from the person. This is a living plasticine, flexible substance. But if we actually dissociate the mind from the material substance, if we say that the mind is irreducible to the material substance, we go into the direction of the monistic concept. Someone said once, the human body is an arbitrary aggregation of protein. It's something transitional. It's not a body of a person. Because from this idea of corporeality as experienced by a person, does not give rise to certain impulses that are the foundation of empirical reflection. Hence, we have this vision of a person as software that could be downloaded to a new hardware, to a new body, or maybe even to a virtual space. And in this way, a person becomes immortal, and the mind can work on different, so to say, devices, careers. In this reductionist vision, this gives rise to a reductionist view of the creation, but also the creator. If man is not created, or has not been created, there is no creator. And that's the second element of the negation of the creator. Here we can see two different persons belonging to two different worlds, but both of them unanimously declaring or negating a creator. On the one hand, we've got James Watson, Nobel Prize winner for the discovery of the helix structure of DNA. He said that we can't task the God with the future of God. And on the other hand, we've got Yuval Noah Harari, who is a philosopher, although actually historian by background. He says that on the one hand, we will have the possibility to augment people into those superhuman. On the other hand, we will reject gods. And the title of one of his books is Homo Deus. Of course, taking reference to the previous panel, this reductionist view of God is based, as we can clearly see, on theological knowledge, on some theological knowledge that is proper for mythology rather than theology. That's why one of my favorite authors, Bishop Barron, at one point he published a post in which he was reflecting on why should we agree with new atheists, such as Harris, Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, people who are sometimes referred to as four horsemen of atheism. Byron said that they are right. The God they reject is actually non-existent. By rejecting that view of God, they are actually right. But at the same time, they fail to ask the question, what kind of God does exist? In classical Christian anthropology, the creator is not competing with his creation. As Sartre said, the more God we have, the less of myself. This is a false image of God. This is not something that the church teaches. Theology in dialogue in modernity, I would add a question mark there. As it has been emphasized a couple of times already during this conference, we need to have a dialogue. A dialogue could be a form of two monologues aimed at one thing, that we should all agree on something. Such a dialogue can give us a sentiment that we apparently agree on something, but at the same time, we don't really get any results. It seems that today people are not ready for such a dialogue. A dialogue and the contact with modernism cannot be also a simple apology. That is, defending Christianity when presenting clearly one's own standpoint we should pay attention to that we present our standpoint clearly. The question about God's image, about reductionism that is unjustified. Here I'm presenting a quote from Jürgen Habermas. As he said himself in one of the interviews, he counts himself as a non-musical religious person. He says himself that going beyond these methodological barriers or boundaries, where empirical results become anthropology or philosophy, and the researchers sometimes are not even aware of crossing those boundaries. This is a pure metaphysics. Today we need to find a new language, a new form. I was referring to Bishop Barron, a bishop from the United States, Wynone-Rochester diocese, if I remember correctly. He built the biggest virtual Catholic community. He gave rise to World on Fire Institute, where we can find deep, great posts on the teaching of the church, but also about the false narratives about the teaching of the church. Bishop Barron emphasizes that we should not trivialize the Christian message. It shouldn't be oversimplified. The last adhortation, so-called climate adhortation by Pope Francis, Laudate Deum, we find an expression, the last sentence: man who wants to replace God becomes the biggest threat for himself, to himself. Is this statement by Pope, who is known as a great supporter of dialogue, is it really a dialogical statement? Is it a clear presentation of that position? So that is my open question for you. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję.
So, Father Professor, thank you for an extremely interesting presentation. It begs a lot of questions, but we agreed that we would ask the questions at the end of the session. So, Professor Przybysz, maybe a presentation first. Professor Monika Przybysz, theologian, media scientist, a specialist in crisis management, public relations management, theologian, educator, lecturer in the Media Institute in Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw, awarded by the Prime Minister of Poland in 2008. She graduated postgraduate degree at the University of Warsaw with distinctions. She did her PhD in 2007 in crisis communication management, and she did her postdoctoral degree in advocacy. She's the head of public relations section in the Polish Public Communications Department. She's a co-author, co-organizer of annual workshops of spokespeople at the church level and public administration level. So she's a laureate of the Proton Award. 2016, she started being a member of work group on ethics, corporate social responsibility in the Ministry of Investment and Development Funds. In 2018, she was a member of CSR Regional Development Section. Until 2022, she was a representative of the Commonwealth of Poland in Bologna follow-up group as part of Bologna process. She's a part of a Committee of Theological Sciences of the Polish Academy of Sciences until 2024. I read all of it very quickly, but Professor also wanted to be called a theologian and media scientist. Please, Professor, take the floor. I'll try to speak like that, holding a microphone and pacing. I wanted to focus on the metaphor of a mirror. Mirror, as we know, when we stand in front of it, we see only a fragment of reality. We see either the side, the front, the back, depending on how we stand. This is what the media now looks like. They're showing only a part, a fragment of church, the bad side of church. In the media, Professor said that we see the shadow of God. There is no God in the media. There is religiosity, there are religious practices, but in the secular media, there isn't a word about God. And this fragment about the silent God we know from the scripture, but when we're analyzing it as media scientists, we can't find God in the media. In the Catholic media, we see only fragments of God and not the full image of God. Looking at various objects, we can see our reflection in water, in the mirror, we may see our reflection elsewhere. But at one point we reach the statement that if we do not give testimony to God, we won't see God even in the Catholic media. We have some bloggers here in the room, and I'm smiling at Dr. Agatha, who's showing, and other professors here, media scientists here who are showing the image of God, but it's a difficult thing to do. What we've been seeing is the worst possible version of church being presented by the media. We have lack of family counseling, poor catechism, because catechists are presented in a very negative light, especially when there were cases of abuse. We see bishops being out of touch because bishops arrive in a place but do not really meet with the youth, so there is a different language that they use. We have fossilized promotion systems, unresolved issues, child abuse that hasn't still been resolved in the Polish Church. I take responsibility for what I'm saying. We have lack of specialized pastoral work, and we may go on and keep listing, and we know the bad sides. We know that church is not without sin, but the sin is the only thing presented by the media. And we spend hours on our smartphones looking at screens, and I'll talk more about our smartphones in a moment. Well, one of the good things about a smartphone is timer. I'll time my speech so that I don't go over the time. The media is communicating a message that it's I who is important and not the community. People are not taught how to build a community. They are addressed individually. It's me, it's I who is the focus of the media. Social media is teaching us about ourselves, about the individual. Therefore, it's difficult to talk about community, let alone church community. Upbringing with screens. I'll jump through some of the slides. TikTok is much faster than my tempo of my speech, and TikTok is what is educating young people. And we media scientists, we look at 5, 6-year-olds watching TikToks, short formats, recreating adult behaviors, modeling their behavior on TikTok influencers. But let's consider if we are not part of it. Children are now thrown right at the deep end into the world of smartphones when they are 5 or 6, and a device is a common present for the Holy Communion. And the age of initiation with the digital devices will become lower. Egocentrics. I've been teaching at the university for 20 years. When a student was asked 20 years ago to open the window, they said okay. 10 years ago they asked why. Now they say, I won't open the window because I'm cold. The perspective has changed. People at homes are glued to their chairs. It's not to do with biology, it's to do with the loneliness. You may have hundreds of friends on social media website, but you are lonely, and loneliness is a big problem among the youth. The Youth 4.0 was one of our projects. We looked into it from the perspective of religion, politics, and the media. And 1 year ago, we gathered data from a lot of youth. It was a forecast of the change, a shift in the public sphere. And we predicted the change of the government on 25,000 young people. Young people point to loneliness as one of the biggest hindrances and the predicaments. Despite relationships, there are no friends, because young people are texting, sending voice messages, interacting with people, but on a very shallow level. But there isn't a deep connection, a deep relationship being built, because on Messenger we may stop having a conversation that is difficult to us. It isn't real interaction. There isn't a duology, as Pope Francis has put it. If you're not able to build a strong relationship, it's a problem. A lot of communication nowadays is video content. Young people are learning about said books, watching summaries of said books online. They don't read. If we don't read, we're not being rational. We're not analyzing the text. By viewing a video, we're passively it. So in Daniel Kahneman, in his book, The Traps of Thinking, put forward a thesis that the brain of a young person is maturing until the 27th year of life. It means that after we graduate, our maturity in the frontal lobe really develops. Frontal lobe responsible for planning, controlling our drives, emotions, instincts. And the youth in Poland is largely atheistic. They haven't been shown the religious experience, the experience of God, the the vertical relationship with God, and lack of being genuine. Everything is perfect online. Online, nobody shows their shortcomings, deficiencies. We do not boast about failures online. If somebody says they're feeling sad, they're depressed, they are isolated and nobody wants to look at that. If a person is having problems and posts about it online, we are detaching ourselves from it. How can one young person build relationships when all they do is text people hours on end, and in the evening pato streams are watched? And it's even pre-pandemic. In the we say that the pandemic spoiled us, but this is data from before the pandemic. 43% of the youth watched dysfunctional influences, dysfunctional streams. Pandora Gate is an example. I don't want to get into that because the topic has been exhausted already, but adult male who dates girls 15 years younger than them, entering very intimate relationships with them, as we know from Pandora Gate. Sexualized children, 4 or 5 years old, who are recreating erotic scenes because they had seen such content online using their smartphone. After 6 to 8 months, after having been given a smartphone, children have access to pornography and software for young children. Well, soft doesn't make them think of software, it makes them think of soft pornography. So naked pictures sent among one another, 10-year-old children, 11-year-old children sending naked photos to one another. Media scientists have been conducting research on teenagers on digital pornography by Dr. Rafał Lange. I encourage you to read the report from 2022, which the report shows that children have access to pornography. They have seen pornography online. 69% of it is watched at school on smartphone. Where is a place for God in that when the algorithms are showing children pornography? Algorithms are not going to show God to young people. Algorithms focus on the content that is personalized for us and oftentimes is not God. We see only a fraction of the content the youth has access to. Where is the place for invitation to churches? The Brits, before the pandemic broke out, published a report that 98% of children, youth in Great Britain, can't tell the difference between fake news and reliable information. There isn't the truth, there's only emotion. Truth is unaccessed. I don't think that British children are too different from Polish children. Finally, wasting time. There are no mechanisms for time management or curtailing the time or curbing the screen time for children. Let's ask ourselves when we go to sleep how much time we've wasted and how much have we actually learned, because we learn very little nowadays. There are on average 16 monitors in a house, 4.5 minutes for a conversation with a child a day. So where is the room for interaction? We ask questions such as, how was school? Did you take out the rubbish? Did you take the dog out for the walk? And hate. Young people are a victim of hate. Looking at it sociologically, we've met over 100 people who we are in touch with now. Young people may have people online who are entering relationships with them, but hundreds of people. In the morning, parents are there with us physically, but not emotionally. In the morning, we do not praise God. We turn off the alarm clock, and at the end, we turn off the snooze. We press the snooze button on the phone. So what do we begin and end days with? Technologies. We don't get a good night's sleep. The youth sleeps 8.5 hours every day, which is clearly not enough for the optimal development of the brain. The hormonal balance is off the whack, and then we have zombies. Children not being able to focus at school, not being able to memorize facts, absorb information. Even if the priest comes and teaches about God and Christ, they are not able to listen because they're half asleep. The youth dreams. The youth is inherently good. Every human being is good. They have dreams. They dream of values they would like to have, but the biological aspect of it matters. When you're looking at screens, melatonin is not released. You'll not be able to get a good night's sleep. If the first thing in the morning is looking at a screen, serotonin levels drop. Serotonin, of course, neurotransmitter being responsible for the well-being, the positive feeling. Then you might say you might not be excited about being part of a congress such as this one. It's not what happens. You feeling down all the time if your serotonin levels are down. You don't even feel the drive, the need to interact with other human beings if your serotonin levels are low. So in the morning, when we are looking at the screen, cortisol is released. We get stressed because people want things from us. Online creators don't give us social media for free. We're paying for social media with our time, with our attention. Millions of dollars are spent to change how one button looks so that they are able to better grab our attention, so that we spend time glued to the screen because somebody's paying for it, for the advertisement, and they're being paid for it. The longer we stick to the screen, the more money they make on advertisement. So they're spending millions of dollars so that they use neurobiological findings to make people more addicted to the screens, so that we spend more time with the screens. And it's on the rise every year. Birth rate is lower if people are using screens, devices more. Women don't want to have a child when they're in their 20s. They want to find a mature man, and mature men are in their 30s usually, and this is why many women give birth to a child in their 30s, because this is the moment when they feel they're ready or equipped to do it. Online you can find, of course, everything you need to live. The sexual sphere is also online. If somebody's addicted to pornography, they are fine on their own. They don't feel they need a partner. And the drop in vocation to be a priest, to be a nun, there isn't a room for that. There isn't a space for that. Social media is not the space where we may find an inspiration to become a priest. The fall of marriages, divorces, and pornography is pointed to one reasons. In Poland, there are no regulations for pornography. The UK worked for 8 years to limit the access to pornography, because when you're starting an account on social media website, you need to input your credit card data and identity card data. And there are children in Poland being treated for addiction to pornography. The report on thousands of people shows that a lot of people, 28% of people, have no will to live. Jacek Dębski has researched this topic, and the findings are dramatic. Every 10th student in Poland declares they have had a suicide attempts. Close to 40% of children are thinking of suicide. Children, even, students, first-year students, are children. They're immature. They haven't matured. They have low self-esteem. 4 out of 5 people are not able to deal with stress of everyday life. Every third young person is diagnosed with depression. Self-mutilation, poor performance at school are just a few items on the list. We're not able to discuss all of the problems we have in church in one go. In the last 10 years, even 5 years ago, this number rose by 30%. Students who said they were feeling sad every day, who were feeling down, who were feeling depressed. If the serotonin levels drops day by day, when we begin our day with the screen that lowers our serotonin, it's not going to end well. We're not going to feel happy. If this is a habit that we have every day, we spend social media for an hour every day in the morning, there is no way a young brain develops in optimal way. If this is made into a habit, the youth is going to be glued to the screens and sad, depressed. If we as church don't do anything about it, let's not be surprised that there are more suicide attempts and suicides. 2017, 730. 2021, 1,500 people. 15 people every day in Poland take their life. Suicide scholars, those who research suicide, say we have to multiply it by 100. There are more suicide attempts unreported. There are young people who don't want to live anymore. 150 children lost this battle. As church, we may passively observe, we may talk about it, we may be observing it, but we need to learn new technologies as well. We need to learn how they work. And I think my recommendation would be to go on TikTok. I know it's difficult for you, but please try. Go on TikTok, see what young people are looking at. Being over 40, it's difficult to go on TikTok and just bear it because of so many stimuli. If we don't do it, we won't be able to understand it. And it's a good thing that a lot of young priests are doing that. In the future, they may be Sundays without trade, and this is what typical Sunday looks like in this meme, in this picture. The church fund may be abolished. Catechism may be removed from school. The new government that is being formed may take those steps, and it's real, it's likely. What can we do? We could change the model of functioning. I'm not saying that we shouldn't build new churches. Well, on the other hand, many of them are emptying, losing their congregations. We need to be closer to a child at the preschool level, because at preschool level a child is being kidnapped, taken away from us, stolen from us by a smartphone. Not primary school, it's already too late with primary school children. The first Holy Communion children look innocent, their souls are innocent, but a lot of them have seen hard pornography already. We need to start earlier. We need to start at preschool level. We need to build Catholic preschools. We need to start forming, educating children at preschool level. We need to grab the attention of parents who are atheists. We need groups of Christian parents. And as I said, we need to enter those spaces. We need to go on TikTok and find out what's there. So being useful for a young person, that's the first rule. Church is not a useful community. It's not seen as useful community. It is seen as a punitive body that is punishing a child. We need to be fighting for that which is important. Young people are fighting for environmental protection. They have the knowledge, they want to learn, but you need to show it to them in an attractive way. 3, surprise. We need to be surprising young people. They mustn't think of church as priests pedophiles. They need a different idea of church. 4, have courage. They need challenge. There are blackout challenge. 14 young people died. Why are these challenges so enticing to young people? Why do so many young people take part in extreme road of the cross? They love challenge. We need to challenge young people, and we are not using that. We're not doing that as a church. We need to be with them. And on a final note, we need to show the meaning, the sense, the meaning of being in church and then being ridiculed when we are, let's say, one of 2 people in class who go to school, where a lot of schools now don't require children to be part of religious education class. Children are leaving this class. So 7, giving hope. The web, the internet, is not giving hope. We should be giving them hope. We shouldn't be edifying them. We should be giving them hope. We should take away the pain. Life is painful for a lot of young people. A lot of suicide attempts that we've mentioned go to show it. The youngest person killing themselves was 8. The first successful suicide attempt. An 8-year-old child killed themselves. 10. love. We should love the young people, students. C, who is genuinely interested in loving them, accepting them. 11, we should listen to them. Pope Francis keeps talking about listening to young people. Young people need to be listened to, and not 3 minutes in the confessional and then sending them away. 12, solving problems. We should be with children at this stage, with very young children, toddlers, with parents who are often immature, who are children themselves, essentially. 13, praise. Young people are criticized online. The parents are criticizing children too. And children go online because they're running away from problems at home. We should be praising young children. 14, giving them community, a place in community, being witness to their problems. 15, get young people involved. 16, pray. In parishes that don't have any youth in them, and there are parishes with no youth at all, the priests ask a question: what should we do with them? First of all, we should pray for them. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, pani profesor.
Thank you very much for this important talk, which shows the challenges that the Church faces. Now I would like to invite Professor Bronisław Kluska, Professor is working at the Faculty of Theology in Slovakia. He graduated also from the Department of Slavic Department in Rosenberg. He also studied at the Catholic University of Lublin. He studied at the Institute of Biblical Studies and had an internship in Vienna, Freiburg, and Papal University in Rome. His PhD was on exegetical analysis of eulogies. In 2014, he defended his habilitation dissertation. He's also teaching in Bańska Bystrzyca. He studies biblical exegesis, among others. He's author of 19 publications in Slovakia and abroad. Professor Kluska is also very well informed about the relations between the Church and the state in the Slovakian context. That's why this perspective will guide his talk now. Thank you very much for this introduction. It's difficult to deliver a talk after such an introduction. But on the other hand, I'm very thankful for this introduction because it shows our reality, what kind of challenges we have to face. I'm a biblical theologian, and the title of my talk, which is the pluralism and a view on pluralism in contemporary world, seems to be a non-biblical topic. So why, as a biblical theologian, have I chosen this topic? There are two reasons. First of all, theology should be contextualized. Even biblical theology, which seems to analyze only old books, should follow that. But the context of biblical theologist, as a person working in Różny Barok, is the context of my students, who in this difficult contemporary world are looking for their faith and how to live in it. I don't know how the situation looks like in Poland, but in Slovakia, Rod Adreher's books are very popular now. What is particularly popular among the youth in Slovakia is this option of this option of escapism from the pluralistic world, which is of course quite difficult. But what I really liked in the previous talk is the idea that we should not flee from that world, because we have to live in it. So escaping, building ghettos is not the solution. The proper solution is to, first of all, understand this world, and secondly, to respond to the ideologies and all those concepts that we may find in it, in this world. That's why I've chosen the second option, the one proposed by Ladisław Hanus, a person that is probably unknown in Poland, but for the Catholic thought in Slovakia, this is a very important person. But he was recognized actually already posthumously. He was working in the communist period, so that's why his books were published already after his death. He was reflecting on the world in which he was living. He survived World War II, which was very difficult for Slovakia, because many people also from the church environment were collaborating with Nazis. He survived communism, spending 13 years of his life in prisons. When he left the prison, he was reflecting on the way how the Catholic Church should respond to the world he had to experience. We are talking here about pluralism. Pluralism is recognized as one of the key categories of contemporary culture and social life. But what is it actually? There are diverse, different, sometimes incongruent ways of viewing pluralism as an idea, value, and even a fact. Pluralism is reality. The aim of my talk is not to provide a holistic analysis of this social fact, but rather to present the Slovakian perspective on it. In Slovakia, we have some eminent philosophers, theologians, and for this very reason, I wanted to present the Catholic thought of Ladisław Hanus, who unfortunately, due to the persecution of the church in Slovakia in the second half of the 20th century, could not develop its philosophy and theology. What he has achieved is still a great source of inspiration today. He was born at the beginning of the 20th century, and in 1925 he joined a seminary that had a very interesting way of operation. The Spišská Capitule belonged to Hungary. At that time, until 2020, a Hungarian was the head of that capital. only when the new seminary was being built, individual clerics were sent to study in Innsbruck or in Switzerland, in Rome. Owing to that, a large group of intellectualists, Catholic, Christian intellectualists, was created. The bishop of that capital helped save this local environment, intellectual environment, that was able to give a rational response to the communist threat. Ladisław Hanus studied between 1926 and 32. In 1932, he obtained his PhD, first in sociology and then in theology. In 1938, he worked as a professor of sociology and moral theology, but also a professor of sacred art. And from 1938 on, he was seen as a very eminent philosopher and thinker. He was editor-in-chief of three important journals: Culture, Revival, and Verbum. Each of them had a particular profile. Kultura, culture, focus on Christian culture, odrodzenie, revival, was mainly interested in rebuilding the new identity, national identity. And if it comes to the journal Verbum, which was a theological journal, apart from that, Hannes was a translator of Libert's works. Hannes worked also in the area of philosophy of culture, referring to the European philosophical tradition, at the same time trying to introduce Slovakian aspects to it, trying to open it to the challenges of the reality at that time. At that point, we could already see different topics related to pluralism appearing in his philosophy. So he was thinking more about pluralism than unification. So the idea of nation was important for him, but he didn't think that it's the most important value. From this point of view, from this perspective, we can see him as a kind of dissident. Some believe that this national identity should be emphasized, but Hannes didn't want to put so much emphasis on that. He was interested in the dialogue between the nations of Europe. The seminary in Spiš was closed in the 40s. At that time, Professor Hanus' career ended. In 1952, he was arrested and sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment for alleged anti-national activity. He spent 15 years in prison. In 1969, still devoid of his civic liberties, he returned and worked at universities, delivering lectures. But it was only after 1968, at the time of the spring, the Prague Spring, that he could return to his pastoral work. He worked in small parishes. The communist authorities at that point didn't want to give him the opportunity to work with larger circles of people. Ladisław Hannes was very often searched by the secret police that tried to destroy his articles, generally his work, because in his work he reflected on the reality. Until 1984, he worked at the university, and later on he moved to Różenborok. His first works that have been preserved thanks to the activity of different priests and also lay people were published in 1986. He was the man of pluralism. He was experienced by monistic communism, earlier also by socialism. But all those experiences opened his philosophy to pluralism. In 1941, he wrote an article on Catholic pluralism. Then in 1943, he wrote an essay on the Catholic humanism. After returning from communist prison, when he still worked and he wrote a book on the principle of pluralism. But all that was kept actually in his in the drawer, so to say, because all those works, especially the books, were published only 3 years after his death. In one of the priests, we could find a manuscript of that book. His understanding of pluralism was metaphysical. Pluralism is based on the distinction of entities, beings, the distinction between the created and non-created beings, the absolute and created beings, transcendental and human beings. This was the point of the departure for this pluralistic philosophy. Of course, when I look at the audience, all of you are different. And Hanus said that whenever we try to look at the reality, we need to accept the diversity and thus the pluralism of beings. We have diversity of events, relations, beings, and also the relations within beings themselves. Hanus understands pluralism as part of reality, also as a human attitude. This attitude can be expressed through the universal view of the entire reality. Catholicism does not only accept pluralism, but this is part of Christian theology. We cannot create a canon based on just one single style, as it was done in the Gothic, for instance. In theology, we cannot absolutize just one particular movement or theological school. But this is not something that we can do in contemporary theology. This was, for instance, done by the German theology in the 20th century. Today, we need a more pluralistic approach if it comes to theological methodology. None of theological schools can include the whole scope of reality, which is plural. Hannes writes that particularism cannot claim to be the whole. The development of pluralism is important for the development of European thought. Just as the power of Christian medieval times was built on antiquity, the new age can be built on the ruins of contemporary culture destroyed by two great wars. Hannes was an optimist, although he experienced World War II, imprisonment. He just could not accept that socialism can become, and communism can become main trends in modernity. He also emphasized the necessity to accept the fact that we are just part of a greater whole. When many representatives during World War II collaborated with the Third Reich, the Slovakian church tended to undermine great universal criteria, having preference for those safer particular national criteria. This was something that Hanus rejected. This reductionist view is the basis for heresy, according to Hanus. Hanus believed pluralism to be the main attitude to be pursued in Catholicism. After Second Vatican Council, this Second Vatican Council was the example how the pluralism could work within the church community. According to Hanus, pluralism was used in the internal reform of the church. If it comes to the relationships between the Pope and the bishops, also the church attitude to the female role in the church. Through ecumenism and redefinition of the role of the church in the world, through the emphasis of the freedom in the church. What was supposed to be built is this organic unity. In the book Pluralism, the Principle of Pluralism, he introduced the first principle, which is diversity and unity, or unity in diversity. Hanus pointed out to two extreme interpretations being bad examples, that is liberalism and totalitarianism. The absolute freedom of man is something that we find in liberalism, while in totalitarianism everything should be subordinated to the state authorities, whereas the golden mean between those two attitudes would be the dignity of the human person and the proper anthropology in the Christianity. Another important thing is how we can actually integrate different attitudes within pluralism. If it comes to this horizontal perspective, we need to read the reality. On the vertical, in the vertical dimension, we need to read the hierarchy of beings. And also, we need to integrate the opposite beings. And here, we see a reference to Gardini's philosophy. What we aim for is the synthesis of those different attitudes. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor, for showing the prophetic quality from a neighboring country's context. I'll give up asking my own question and encourage the audience to ask their question. I think there will be plentiful, judging by the reaction to the presentation. So if there are any questions now, feel free to ask them. Now's the time.
My question goes straight to Professor Monica. She talked about the image of the church, or the image that the media portray of the church. And we know that our church is having many enemies, some within and others without. So they use the media to make sure that they destroy the church. And they create scandals and look for more scandals even where there are no scandals, to push the church to the corner. In order to have their way and be able to promote and advertise the immoralities and all the evils of our time. Because the teaching of the church stands as a stumbling block to all their ideas. And in all this, the church seems to be a bit passive and ready to admit guilt, to the point of sometimes not listening properly to the accused. So, dear teacher, professor, if this guilty conscience of the church and this passive attitude endures, what will be the future of the church? Because the enemies of the church are not ready to relent. Today, they are looking for the scandals as such in the mission houses here and there. Tomorrow, they'll be coming to the churches to listen to our homilies and then get some points to take us on with it. So if this attitude of the church endures, what will the church become in the future? And what can the church do to be able to counter-attack the major? Thank you.
To ja może w 3 zdaniach.
So, very briefly, my answer. The media attack secular media are mainly left-wing, and they do attack the church. Sometimes they're tasked with purifying the church. I've been dealing with crisis communication for 20 years. I've been helping church institutions resolving internal issues for 22 years. I've met only one bishop who did everything I told him to do, and he won. He was well off, and it's an example of a well-managed crisis. And I know only one parish priest who did everything I advised him to do for his own benefit. It's not much. Some people follow up on the advice, and the crisis still come out. And I wanted to say this. Looking at the recent developments, the media are helping, because Bishop Kaszak wouldn't be demoted from Sosnowiec office if the it's not just about homosexuality of priests, it's not just about orgies. The problem was that a man who was unconscious, who was dying, wasn't helped, and this is inhumane. And I'm not mentioning anything else but just this situation with the unconscious man. This is one aspect of the media. They're helping to clear the church of all the dysfunction, and it's a miracle that I keep working with prosecutors' documents and church documents. It's a miracle. I'm still kind of on it. Yeah, the media, of course, are trying to find scandals. Sometimes we are helping church prove that accusations are unfounded, that accusations are simply an attack on the church without any grounds to back it up. The first function of the media is helpful because the church commits sins, was sinful, and media help purify us in a way by showing what has really happened and issuing their comment on it. Of course, sometimes manipulating the facts. Still, they help. The second dimension of media has to be counteracted, because the information that is reliable and the true facts reach smaller audiences, 1,000 times smaller group of people after we have corrected some information. But the church does not use rectification of information, and it should be done. The church is not aware that there are tools to be used that we should be using. Using the example of the Czech Republic, we should be using secular tools to defend the church, and we're not doing that. The rectification is a mere 1% of a crisis situation, and there are no statements that prove that some accusations had been false. The final note, I am with Benedict XVI on this one. We are becoming ever smaller, and we will grow even smaller. We're trying to pretend like we're not. We're counting the legs and not the people in the church to double the number. Sorry for putting it bluntly. We are in minority. Our church is smaller, and that's a fact. And we need to be careful about forming and educating the 50-somethings. And Professor Grabowska showed in her report that we need to be educating clergy to be better at. If the parents are not witnesses of faith, men will not be believers. And this was a clear finding in the research, that men tend to be atheistic. What happened in 2020 during the pandemic, the so-called women's strike, huge manifestations, hateful comments leveled at church faith, and the Law and Justice, the ruling party at the time, lost popularity because of that. What we do is not a piece of the puzzle. What the church is doing permeates all levels, all of society. If we at church are not witnesses of faith, if we're not able to attract young people to experiencing living faith will be even smaller. We need to be educating adults, clergy, parents, opening Catholic preschools, starting from ground up, starting with very young people. And Benedict said in the 60s that we are a small church, and he was right. But we will endure, we will survive. Jesus Christ is the head of church, so we will survive. One more question. There's still time for one more question. As to what Professor has just said, I walked in the final lecture. I found out what the previous ones had been about. The problem isn't issuing a decision months after an incident. It is about how Bishop Kaszak commented on the scandal throughout for 2-3 months after the scandal had come to our fore. This man, Bishop Kaszak, was avoiding taking responsibility. And something similar happened with Bishop Gondecki. After 7 priests left last summer, please let me finish. This was just whinging about bad formation of the church. There was no taking responsibility. Hierarchs in church do not admit failure. They don't take personal responsibility for the priest's action. The whinging, the self-pitying, instead of taking responsibility and coordinating efforts. What you said just now about passing down knowledge. What knowledge? What is the formation of priests? Alienation, secularization, making their own faith private, selling it on the outside. The times have changed. The priests are completely unfit, ill-equipped to be leading communities and churches. And what you said, the church being in minority, and Benedict said more. He said that we either become a group of small communities or we're gone completely. And the final remark, I've delved two last days, I was part of a symposium to commemorate the encyclical anniversary. There were 15 to 20 priests, and I believe there was intellectual chaos, incongruent with the teachings of the church. They talked about Einstein's ideas, scientific ideas, and my dilemma is this. I'm a member of one church community, 15 priests listen to this intellectual bubble, wasting their time, and for 3 months we've not been able to find a presbyter who could be with us and bring God to earth, to the people. Thank you for this comment. This session was quite dynamic. We didn't read the letter by Father Professor Janusz Mariański. It will be made available. We'll make sure it is printed and included in theological annals. That would be, well, the proceedings after this conference. So thank you, speakers, for a fascinating session. This is an ending to our meeting. We may be feeling a bit tired, but these ending notes were striking and were strong. Thank you. I also wanted to thank Professor Piotr Kopiec for moderating the session. And whenever there are interesting topics to be covered, the time is running out. But it's much better than sitting around not knowing what to do with each other. A few bits of information. 2:30, Academic Church of the Catholic University of Lublin will host a ceremony by Father Ignacik, the head of the Jesuit community. He will be talking about the church. It's a fascinating story to just read what's written on the walls. For those who don't know, I encourage you. It's a real intellectual treat. It will be conducted in Polish and in English, so everybody is welcome, everybody who wants it. It's a half an hour visit, 2:30 today in the Academic Church of the Catholic University of Lublin here. In the afternoon at 4 o'clock, CTW 408, a meeting with Catholic influencers, Father Picur as well as Father Kozłowski. And then there will be Father Krzysztof Augustyn as well as Dr. Agata Ruiner. I also welcome you to take part in the church service at 7 o'clock. Father Bishop Adam Bab will give a sermon. And in the evening, a play class, haberdashery. You may sign up online or with our students at the reception here. The theatre is situated in downstairs, room 002. There are only 82 seats, so please sign up. First come, first served. The room is limited in size. Another invitation, tomorrow's final session, it will be until noon. Deans of Theology institutes will be members. This session is open to everyone, so by all means, I'd like to welcome all interested in the place and development of theology, because this will be the topic of discussion tomorrow on the basis of the findings of the 4 previous days. We'll be talking about how we envisage the future of theology. Important questions for theologians to consider. Also for theology institutes as well as theology students. So once again, I wanted to thank the speakers. This was a privilege to host you today and to listen to you today.
Po angielsku.